There's a document. Joseph Smith wrote it in his own hand. No scribe, just him, sometime around 1832. It's the earliest written account of the first vision, the only one he drafted himself without someone else holding the pen. It sat in the church historian's office for 133 years without being published, referenced in curriculum, or disclosed to members. It became available to scholars in 1965 through a BYU graduate student. The church got to call it Discovery. That's the provenance. Here's what's in it. In the 1832 account, Joseph writes that he was in his 16th year when this happened. The canonized version said he was 14. In the 1832 account, one being appears. Joseph writes, quote, "I saw the Lord." That's the sentence. No God the Father, no two personages, just Christ.
Most of us only ever got the later version of that event, which was written in 1838. By that time, significant details had changed. In the version we were taught, Joseph was 14 years old, not 16. He prayed in a grove. God the Father and Jesus Christ appeared as two separate beings. As Gordon B. Hinckley said in 2002, every major truth claim in Mormonism gets stacked on top of that scene. If the first vision didn't happen, the whole church is a fraud. And Hinckley said that 11 years before the church's gospel topic essay acknowledged that there are actually 4 different written accounts of the first vision, and the earliest one wouldn't be recognizable as the version most of us were taught. Growing up in church, nobody handed us the 1832 account. A lot of us found out it existed years later, decades later, on the internet, after bearing testimony of a story we were never given enough information to evaluate. That's what this episode is about.
Hannah and Jess, we got away. Now we're unpacking what they won't say. Behind temple walls and cover-ups. We're pouring tea in your coffee cups. It's the post-Mormon post-mortem. Digging up what they want forgotten. Trauma, truth, and crime, yeah, we're surviving. It's post-Mormon post-mortem.
Hello, Eternal Family. Welcome to Post-Mormon Postmortem, the podcast where we lovingly sift through the ashes of our former faith, one was our belief and repressed memory at a time.
We explore everything from the church's cultural weirdness and doctrinal whiplash to the deep wounds of religious trauma, Mormon crime, and the messy, glorious road to recovery.
Whether you are freshly out, years removed, or just ex-mo curious, this really is the right place. We're here to hold space, build tea, and call out the cultish stuff hiding in plain sight. I'm your host, Jess.
And I'm Hannah. And today we're talking about the first vision accounts plural, the version we were taught, the version Joseph first wrote, and what the church has chosen to disclose. And Jess, I have to tell you, with these gospel topic essays, yawn. No one ever accused the church of being interesting. I cannot wait until we get through these essays.
We're
So let's
chipping
get into
away.
it.
We're chipping away. We're getting close. So the vision as taught, the version most of us know, starts the same way every time. Joseph Smith is 14 years old. His family has recently moved to Western New York. There's a religious revival happening in the area, and young Joseph wants to know which church is true. So he goes into a grove of trees near his family's home, and he prays. The Father and the Son appear, 2 separate embodied beings standing above him in a pillar of light. Christ tells him his sins are forgiven. He's told to join none of the existing churches, that they've all gone wrong. And then Joseph comes home shaken. That's the story the church is built on. That account was canonized. It's in the scriptures. It's the version in seminary, in sacrament meeting talks, in every missionary discussion that has ever opened a door. Investigators who hear it and pray about it and join the church are joining based on that specific event as described in that specific account.
Yeah, it's so integral to the story of Mormonism that there is no, if you're raised in the church and someone asked you when did you first learn about the first vision, it's equivalent to asking, just tell me about the first drink of water you took. Describe
Right.
to me the first time you had a glass of water. And you'd be like, it's it's pre-memory. I
Pre-
don't have a memory of
yeah,
that.
pre-verbal. I don't
It's all I
know.
ever knew, right? It was like in your DNA. It's like there's no time that you don't have this story in your life.
It really is. You can't, I can't either sit and go, well, I think I was 6 and I was sitting in, Sister so and so's class. No, it's there. It permeates everything. And when I say that, I mean, Joseph Smith's first prayer is a hymn. It's hymn 26. Primary kids learn it. The lyrics put you there in this scene I just described: the grove, the spreading trees, the light, the morning, and then the appearance of the Father and Son. Every former LDS person knows this song. Most of it learned it well before we were 8. We learned it before we were baptized, before anyone had asked us to evaluate anything. The 1838 account came in through a hymn before it came in through doctrine for most of us.
Do you remember the hymn? Because when we were like researching for this episode and you had mentioned that, I was like, that sounds so familiar, but I couldn't remember it. And then I went and looked it up on YouTube, and now it's been stuck in my head for like the last 4 days. Do you remember it? It goes, oh, how lovely was the morning
Hannah,
when beamed the sun up.
See, I purposely did not go back and listen to it because I had a small thread in the deep recesses of my memory, and I knew if I listened to it, I would do the same thing. I'd have that earworm on repeat in my head, like like when
These
we did an
were
earlier
humming
episode, and we
sweet birds singing, music
here it goes.
ringing through the grove. I will say I do miss singing hymns. God damn, could I blast those out? I don't care if they sound good, they feel good.
Oh,
Oh, they sound like Kyle McKay. It feels good to move to these
it
songs.
does feel good. I mean, but my favorite is still the banger "Popcorn Poppin' on the Apricot Tree." I mean, that
Ooh,
nothing can beat that one.
yeah, nothing can beat that one for
Yeah.
pure confusion. You're welcome to that song. I mean, if I had to have it in my head all week, you have to, but oh, they are catchy, they stick. They're designed to, because it helps drive the evil spirits away.
The missionary manual is where it shows up as doctrine. Preach My Gospel 2023 edition, chapter 3, lesson 1. That edition added a single parenthetical after presenting the 1838 account. Quote, there are 4 accounts of the vision that followed, recorded by Joseph Smith or by scribes under his direction. See Gospel Topic Essays, First Vision Accounts. End quote. That's the entire acknowledgement. One sentence. No explanation of what those accounts say. No indication they differ in any substantive way. The lesson doesn't describe the 1832 account. It doesn't tell you one of those accounts has a different number of beings. It points you to another page and moves on. The 4 accounts exist. There's now a footnote that admits it. The lesson still just presents one.
As I said at the beginning of this episode, Gordon B. Hinckley, our prophet, from 1995 to 2008, said it as plainly as it gets in October 2002 General Conference. He said, quote, our whole strength rests on the validity of that vision. It either occurred or it did not occur. If it did not, then this work is a fraud. If it did, then it is the most important and wonderful work under the heavens. Close quote. That's the whole institution putting its weight on one single event.
Joseph Smith gave 4 written accounts of the first vision, not variations on a theme. 4 accounts with substantively different details. Different divine beings appear. Different reasons are given for the vision. Different things are said to Joseph. And I'll just note here that Hannah and I care about different aspects of this, and you'll kind of hear a little bit. The church's current bicentennial materials and the Ask of God film reference 9 accounts total. That acknowledgement is recent, and we'll get to how recent. 4 of those 9 accounts are Joseph's own, written or dictated by him. The other 5 are secondhand. People who heard him tell it and wrote down what they remembered. That's where those other accounts come from. The 4 that Joseph authored accounts, those are the ones with doctrinal variation. And those are the ones that matter here. The 1838 account, the one in scriptures, that was written about 18 years after the event it describes, if the event happened in 1820. The date comes from the 1838 account itself. There's no contemporary record that confirms it.
Yeah, the earliest written account, as we've said at least half a dozen times by now, is from 1832. And Joseph wrote it himself. It's the only one he wrote without a scribe. As he said himself, ink and pen and paper, they were a struggle for him. But in that story, he says, at about the age of 12 years, my mind became seriously impressed with regard to the all-important concerns for the welfare of my immortal soul, which led me to searching the scriptures, believing as I was taught that they contained the word of God, and thus applying myself to them. My intimate acquaintance with those of different denominations led me to marvel exceedingly, for I discovered that they did not adorn their profession by a holy walk and godly conversation, agreeable to what I found contained in that sacred depository. This was a grief to my soul. Thus, from the age of 12 years to 15, I pondered many things in my heart concerning the situation of the world of mankind, the contentions and divisions, the wickedness and abominations, and the darkness which pervaded the minds of mankind. My mind became exceedingly distressed, for I became convicted of my sins, and by searching the scriptures I found that mankind did not come unto the Lord, but that they had apostatized from the true and living faith, and there was no society or denomination that was built upon the gospel of Jesus Christ as recorded in the New Testament. I felt to mourn for my own sins and for the sins of the world, for I learned in the scriptures that God was the same yesterday, today, and forever, that he was no respecter of persons, for he was God. For I looked upon the sun, the glorious luminary of the earth, and also the moon, rolling in their majesty through the heavens, and also the stars shining in their courses, and the earth also upon which I stood, and the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the heaven, and the fish of the waters, and also man walking forth upon the face of the earth in majesty, and in the strength of beauty, whose power and intelligence in governing the things which are so exceedingly great and marvellous, even in the likeness of him who created them. And when I considered upon these things, my heart exclaimed, well hath the wise man said, it is a fool that saith in his heart, there is no God. My heart exclaimed, all these bear testimony and bespeak an omnipotent and omnipresent power, a being who maketh laws and decreeth and bindeth all things in their bounds, who filleth eternity, who was and is and will be from all eternity to eternity. And I considered all these things, and that being seeketh such to worship him as worship him in spirit and in truth. Therefore I cried unto the Lord for mercy, for there was none else to whom I could go and obtain mercy. And the Lord heard my cry in the wilderness. And while in the attitude of calling upon the Lord, in the 16th year of my age, a pillar of light above the brightness of the sun at noonday came down from above and rested upon me. I was filled with the Spirit of God, and the Lord opened the heavens upon me, and I saw the Lord, and he spake unto me, saying, Joseph, my son, thy sins are forgiven thee. Go thy way, walk in my statutes, and keep my commandments. Behold, I am the Lord of glory. I was crucified for the world, that all those who believe on my name may have eternal life. Behold, the world lieth in sin at this time, and none doeth good, no, not one. They have turned aside from the gospel, and keep not my commandments. They draw near to me with their lips, while their hearts are far from me. And mine anger is kindling against the inhabitants of the earth, to visit them according to their ungodliness, and to bring to pass that which hath been spoken by the mouth of the prophets and apostles. Behold, and lo, I come quickly, as it is written of me, in the cloud, clothed in the glory of my Father. My soul was filled with love, and for many days I could rejoice with great joy. The Lord was with me, but I could find none that would believe the heavenly vision. Nevertheless, I pondered these things in my heart.
So I have to just commentary here. How many 12 to 15-year-olds do you know who are pondering things in this way?
Well, I mean, just commentary here, but if you want to look at Dan Vogel's family systems theories around Joseph's alcoholic father and the way that he was parentified and the way his parents had conflict about religion, right? And his mum. So actually, it doesn't. I well believe that Joseph wanting to, be the one that made everything copacetic. There's so many family things going on. I can imagine that Joseph was like, I'll find the answer. I'll figure it out, Mum and Dad. They're fighting about which church is true. I'll be the hero. I'm the golden boy in this family, and I'll go to God and ask. That's what I'll do. I can actually see while he's, just what do we actually know about Joseph Smith? We know he told stories, and we know his family enabled them and lapped them up, right? And enjoyed his tales of the inhabitants, of the people who lived in the land before, that he used to regale his family with at candlelight in the evening, practicing. Anyway, it's really, really interesting to think about the psychological dynamics of
For
what is
sure.
happening
Yeah.
here. And he is writing this down at what age he was writing it, Yeah, it's massively interesting to see a story evolve in real time is what.
It is, yes. And for me, I just struggle. And I think your, explanation aside, there were a lot of dynamics in that family that I think surely influenced this. And perhaps it was different, in the 1800s, but I just do not know many 12-year-olds who are pondering the situation of the world of mankind, the wickedness and abominations that regardless of how spiritual their families are and what they were raised in. I think that the vastness that he describes of his thoughts and how philosophically he's evaluating things, I don't buy
Yeah,
it.
I fully agree that he's rewriting history, looking back. Oh, I mean, 100%.
And
I guess
assigning
I'm just,
himself quite a bit of,
yeah, the
intellectual
explanation,
prowess and
yeah,
study.
the family system stuff, I think provides answers or explanations, but it's for the stuff that came later, yeah. As he's I mean, what version of himself is he selling, right? That he was a
Right.
12-year-old boy, but he had been foreordained, you have to remember, because, I mean, he was the one who was gonna, bring about the restoration of.
So that's how I
So
see.
it makes
Yes.
sense, it actually makes total sense that he was, pondering those serious kind of things pre-puberty and into adolescence.
So Hannah just read it, the earliest account, and it describes an older teenager, someone who already knows the churches have gone wrong, who goes to pray not because he's confused about which one to join, but because he's convicted of his own sinfulness. That's a completely different person with a completely different problem than the 14-year-old in the grove that we were taught. And in the 1832 account, one being appears. Joseph writes, I saw the Lord. That's it. No God the Father, no two personages, just Christ. In the 1838 canonized account, quote, I saw two personages whose brightness and glory defy all description standing above me in the air, end quote. So You have one being versus two. That's not a different emphasis on the same event. Those are different events.
The 1835 account is in Joseph's diary. November 9th, 1835, during a conversation with a visitor named Robert Matthews. In that version, an angel appears first, then the father and son. 3 separate figures in sequence, not 2 together. The 1842 account is yet a 4th version, and the Gospel Topic essay tells us that it was written in response to Chicago Democrat editor John Wentworth's request for information about the Latter-day Saints. Okay, so this is commonly known as the Wentworth Letter, and this account was printed in the Times and Seasons in 1842. It was public-facing, and it was written for a non-Mormon audience. It's concise, and it contains a different framing yet again. So across the 4 accounts, the number of beings who show up change, the sequence changes of what order of events people appear in, what Joseph is told changes, the motivation of why he went to pray changes. The apologetic response to this is in the essay. Memory naturally varies in emphasis and detail, and we'll go into detail and emphasis about what the essay does with that. But the essay's memory argument and the suppression timeline are 2 different problems. Okay, so let's talk about the timeline.
So in 1832, Joseph writes the account in his personal letterbook, the only first vision account in his own hand. It sits in the church historian's office, and it's not published, not referenced in curriculum, not acknowledged publicly for 133 years. In 1965, Paul Cheesman, a BYU graduate student, includes the account in his master's thesis, which was titled An Analysis of the Accounts Relating to Joseph Smith's Early Visions. That's the first time it becomes available to scholars. In 1966, James Allen, who would later serve as assistant church historian, publishes the first major scholarly analysis of the multiple accounts in Dialogue, a Journal of Mormon Thought. It's an independent journal, not the church. In 1971, the church publishes the 1832 account in Improvement Era, its own magazine, 5 years after it appeared in the independent scholarship. So here's when the church's acknowledgement actually happened. That's the 2013 Gospel Topics essay, which goes up really quietly on the church's website. So that's the acknowledgement timeline that we promised earlier. When it became public, it came through a BYU graduate student whose access to the pages had been quietly arranged, not through the church making it available. And that's the suppression problem. And there's a second problem, and it runs deeper. James Allen documented, and as I mentioned, Allen was the church's own former assistant church historian, that no contemporary writings from the 1830s mention the first vision. No church publications from that decade. There are no journals, no correspondence. Nothing from the period when the vision allegedly occurred from anyone who knew Joseph mentions it. So Allen's conclusion was the general membership of the church knew little or nothing about it. Joseph's own 1838 account says he told a Methodist minister and was met with contempt, that his story caused persecution. But no one wrote that down either. Not the minister, not Joseph's family, not anyone in the early church. The 1832 account was suppressed. The event wasn't being talked about at all in the decade it supposedly happened. So those are 2 separate problems here.
The suppression, it wasn't passive, right? This isn't passive, these pages just fell out. These pages, the reason it's important to emphasize this was a bound book is because they were physically cut out of Joseph Smith's letterbook. The Joseph Smith paper's own source, it documents the excision. So when the 3rd page was being cut out, there was a small tear, and can see that tear was mended with cellophane tape. Cellophane tape was invented in 1930, so the repair places the removal after 1930 and before 1965, when they were described as cut out. Those cut out pages were kept in Joseph Fielding Smith's personal office safe, not in the Church General Archives. Joseph Fielding Smith, as we've mentioned, he ran the church historian's office from 1921 to 1970 and later became the church president. This is like where my curiosity led me. I had to figure out the custody trail of these pages. Right? Who talked to this graduate student? The church can acknowledge like the physical facts. It can talk about the motive and the pages being cut out. But what I want to know is how did the existence come to be known, real quick? Because that proves that it was actively suppressed. And if there was nothing to suppress, then why suppress it? Levi Edgar Young is a key witness here. He was the president of the First Council of the 70, because you've got to have your hierarchies. So Levi Young, being like a general authority, this was in 1953. Lamar Peterson meets with Levi Young. Levi Young tells Lamar Peterson he is aware of the existence of a strange account of the first vision. He says it's written in Joseph's own hand and it's been concealed for about 120 years in a locked vault. He won't give any more details to Lamar Peterson, but he says the account doesn't agree with the official version. That Jesus is the center of the vision in the first one, right? Because he says he was crucified for the sins of the world, so it can only be Jesus Christ. God, the Father, isn't mentioned at all. Lamar Peterson keeps the information confidential until Levi Young dies in December 1963. So, December 1963, he's been holding onto this information for 10 years. And in early 1964, so he just waits a few months, he tells Gerald and Sandra Tanner about the account of the first vision. And the Tanners wrote to Joseph Fielding Smith and asked if they could see it. And Joseph Fielding Smith refused. So suddenly the church is aware that people are aware of its existence. So then around this time, coincidentally, that the Tanners requested to see it, Joseph Fielding Smith, these 3 excised pages that he's been keeping in private custody in his office safe, he transfers them back into the regular church historian's collection. From the safe to the regular collection they go. And then he authorizes Earl E. Olson, his assistant church historian, to show them to Paul Cheesman, the BYU graduate student who is writing a master's thesis on Joseph Smith's visions. This just random master's level student, not the church historian or anything. No, you're just authorized to show this never before seen documents that have been sitting in a safe, not in the archives. So Cheesman says that Olson shows him how the pages matched the edge of the journal, proving that they came from Joseph Smith's letterbook. The church got to call this a discovery. Paul Cheesman in his thesis is like, what a scoop that he gets to acknowledge that he's the first one to get out, look at these pages. But Joseph Fielding Smith's name is not mentioned as the person who had hold of them all that time.
Hid them.
Hid them. Exactly. There's no plausible deniability there. The Gospel Topics essay on First Vision accounts isn't a dismissal. It's worth reading carefully because what it does genuinely. The central argument is that multiple accounts of the same event are normal. Memory varies and people emphasize different details depending on the audience and the circumstance. The essay points out how biblical accounts of Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus differ across the book of Acts. There are different events, but there are different details. It's an argument that historians of religions make all the time.
It is. But the memory argument has a specific limit. It only works if the variations were in public circulation and members had the chance to evaluate them. The 1832 account wasn't a variation that members knew about and chose how to interpret. It didn't exist for members. It was in a safe in Salt Lake City. The essay's memory variation framing applies to accounts that people have access to. It doesn't reach the suppression problem. So those are two different situations, but the essay treats them as one.
In the Gospel Topic essay, the embellishment section deals with the number and identity of heavenly beings. So the subject of memory, Jess, you already talked about, where it says, that there is historical evidence that is consistent with Joseph's description. The essay says that an argument frequently made regarding the accounts of Joseph Smith's first vision is that he embellished his story over time. Okay, so first of all, he saw one being, and then there were two with angels, and then they appeared in different orders. Okay, so this is how the church accounts for that, and I'm going to quote directly from the essay. This argument focuses on two details: the number and identity of the heavenly beings Joseph Smith stated that he saw. Joseph Smith's first vision accounts describe heavenly beings with greater detail over time. The 1832 account says, "The Lord opened the heavens upon me, and I saw the Lord." His 1838 account states, "I saw two personages, one of whom introduced the other as my beloved son." As a result, critics have argued that Joseph Smith started out reporting to have seen one being, the Lord, and ended up claiming to have seen both the Father and the Son. Close quote. How does the church account for this? The 1832 account clearly says, "The Lord opened the heavens upon me and I saw the Lord," and the 1838 account says, "I saw two personages." So the essay says, there are other more consistent ways of seeing the evidence. A basic harmony in narrative across time must be acknowledged at the outset. 3 of the 4 visions clearly state that two personages appeared. The outlier is Joseph Smith's 1832 account, the one we hid away. So this is how the church accounts for it. They say, another way of reading the 1832 account is that Joseph Smith referred to two beings, both of whom he called Lord. The embellishment argument hinges on the assumption that the 1832 account described the appearance of only one divine being, but the 1832 account does not say only one being appeared. No, that the two references to Lord are separated in time. First, the Lord opens the heavens, then Joseph Smith sees the Lord. This reading of the account is consistent with Joseph's 1835 account, which has one being appearing first, followed by another soon after. The 1832 account then can reasonably be read to mean that Joseph Smith saw one being, who then revealed another, and he referred to them both as the Lord. So the Lord opened the heavens to me, whereupon I saw the Lord, the other Lord. Okay? So that's how the church deals with that. It's bananas.
It's bananas. It's bananas. So they've got that whole smoke and mirrors, but then they've got a second move that's more specific. So when the essay discusses the 1832 account, the earliest one in Joseph's own hand, the one that doesn't include God the Father, it calls it an account of his experience. Okay? So, but they say it's not an account of the first vision. The institutional event has a name. The 1832 document gets a description. So that's the same move the translation essay makes when it calls the seer stone complex, right? Same architecture, different word. The document is acknowledged. Its relationship to the canonical event is left ambiguous. Someone bore testimony of that event by name with certainty, based on what the institution chose to put in front of them. 7 years after the Gospel Topics essay went up, Russell M. Nelson issued a formal proclamation marking the bicentennial of the first vision, April 5th, 2020, and it reads, quote, "God the Father and his beloved Son, Jesus Christ, appeared to Joseph, a 14-year-old youth," end quote. So the essay existed, the Joseph Smith papers existed, but the proclamation reads like neither of them does. That's what institutional certainty looks like after disclosure. Nobody hands new members the 1832 account of baptism. The essay exists and it's on the church's website. It went up in 2013, as we've said. But that doesn't reach someone who joined in 1987 or 2004, or like Hannah and I, learned the song in primary before we could even read.
Yeah. Now, the original 2013 Gospel Topic essay handles the differences between the First Vision accounts. But did you know, Jess, that there is a newer First Vision frequently asked questions on the church website, and that handles the cut out pages?
Really? I
Yes,
did
so
not
one of the
know
frequently
that.
asked questions is, was the 1832 account of the First Vision cut out of a letterbook and restricted from public access? And then the church's answer begins with Joseph Fielding Smith. The church says the bound volume containing Joseph Smith's 1932 history was likely part of a collection in Joseph Fielding Smith's office safe. The collection of things we don't want people to see.
Right?
And that someone from the historian's office staff likely removed the pages of the 1832 account from the bound volume. So they don't blame Joseph Fielding Smith. They say it was likely someone from the historian's office staff. But why?
Why?
What
What would be
possible
the
explanation?
motivation?
Yeah, right. Why would you plausibly, like a historian, take a knife and excise pages out of a bound letterbook? Well, the church says that there was no reason for them to hide the account. In fact, it says on the frequently asked questions page, quote, there is nothing about the 1832 account that would merit cutting it out and hiding it. Yet the facts remain. That's what happened. The 1832 account was cut out and hidden. So we've got physical evidence, right? We know
Right.
it happened. And that's where it's so wild that it's like, if there was nothing to hide, why are you hiding stuff?
Exactly. Well, we know the church hides lots and lots of things, and with the internet age, all of it is going to slowly come out. So,
And, the essays finally, like, where does it land? It lands where all of them land. The final move is you just got to go to prayer, right? It's like the historical record still has to be faced. There are just so many differences that the church, like, has yet to account for. And really most interesting to me is accounting for why access was so restricted to those pages in the safe. But the essay just tells the church members that accounts naturally differ and the pages might have been cut out for organizational reasons. That's their answer. Bananas.
that is bananas. That is bananas. It's so interesting to me that the church will basically give an argument, they'll present a set of information, and then in the same breath tell you to look away and not inquire further. When you look at like the Joseph Smith Papers Project, that's the church's own scholarly publication initiative, launched in when was it launched? In 2008. It runs under the church history department. It's published all four First Vision accounts side by side with both scholarly annotation and facsimiles of the original documents, including the 1832 account in Joseph's handwriting. But most members don't know this, right? But the church did produce the full record. It chose to put it in an academic archive and keep the missionary manual and the things that everyday members are taught the way they are. That's not oversight. That's not. The Joseph Smith papers are real scholarship, but they don't show up in seminary. They don't show up in sacrament meeting or the missionary discussions. So they are still doing the same sleight of hand. They are still suppressing.
That's the institutional betrayal. It's institutional
It
betrayal. It's
is.
lying to people. People don't like being lied to. It doesn't feel good and it hurts when you dedicate. We've gone over this. It is no exaggeration to say people dedicate their lives to this institution. And then to find out at age whatever, when you get on social media or your kid comes and tells you or your spouse or whoever, they found this something out. The pain of the betrayal of being realized you've been lied to far exceeds the scope of the details of like what it was. To me, it's more like the church lies to its members and then it lies about lying.
Yeah.
And then it asks you to trust
Lying
it.
liars
And that's
who
not how
lie.
relationships work. And it is hurtful. And they don't get it.
They don't get it. And
That there's
I
a
think
human element of betrayal.
Yeah, that human element. I mean, as we were researching, I was thinking about the time that my ward, when I was really small, I think I must have been 4, the ward rented a bus. And my dad drove, he was a bus driver at the time. We drove up from Virginia to the Grove. And then after like Niagara Falls and some other things. But I remember being at the Grove and the tears in my dad's eyes as he took my sister and me aside and bore his testimony about what he knew was true about what Joseph saw in this very same place and how spiritual and powerful it was for him to be there. And I mean, that's a core memory because I was really quite small. Somebody like my dad is never going to feel betrayed. He's going to think that any evidence to the contrary of this is, is Satan. It's the adversary tricking people. Like
It's wicked men
he
putting
probably would
wrong
never.
records, false records in
Yes,
newspapers
exactly.
preemptively.
He would even doubt the church's own gospel topics essays because that's where he
Right.
is in his faith. And I want to say, people are allowed to believe in the first vision. I'm not harshing on anybody. They're allowed to find the variations explainable, the memory argument persuasive, the suppression timeline in an institutional failure rather than evidence of anything more, right? I know from my own family, from my own father, that's a conclusion that someone can reach, but
Right.
they
You have
deserve to reach it with all the information in front of them.
exactly. I was thinking of informed choice. Exactly. It's like, then give me everything because as you said, there's nothing to hide, right? Great. Awesome. It's just so obvious that it's actually just paternalistic as well. It's sort of like, oh, well, you don't need to know this. Okay, I'll be the
Right.
judge of that. I'll be
I
the
agree.
judge of, give me all the information available and then I'll be the judge of what matters and what doesn't. Thanks. And I'll
Right.
make my judgment based on all the available information. You don't get to just determine what you dole out and what people can and can't handle. It's like a particular heartbreak that you will hold a lot of pain or just like be witness to it, be in the same space as other people experiencing it, but working with people who are deconstructing, their religious upbringing, there's just a whole level of like betrayal that needs to be
That
sorted through.
needs to be addressed. Right.
And it's just things like this. It's things like this. I mean,
Yeah. Find it on our own, do the reconciliation without any kind of guidance or real guidance from the church and people within. I mean, that's the ask.
well, that's why we think these, any kind of post-Mormon support that you can find is like so invaluable, right? Even just knowing that you're not the only one who feels this level of betrayal and that it's perfectly typical and that other people feel the same way too.
Yep. And have experienced that same disconnect.
Yeah, that punch in the gut of like, I have been lied to my whole life and who knew? And did they know they were lying to me? And are my parents innocent in this? Are they just duped too? Or like what gives?
Yeah. You got to hope they are. If you had a quick flash of anger thinking about how what you were taught wasn't the full story, consider buying us a coffee. Every contribution, whether $5 or $25, helps us keep doing the research, putting the pieces together, and calling out the lack of accountability for all of the harm the church has caused. The link is in the show notes.
Exactly. If you had a flash of joy hearing, oh, how lovely was the morning, please like, subscribe, follow, or share. Before we go, many thanks to Hannah W. for her incredible voice on our theme song, Dr. Dave for his extra guitar work, to Mick for polishing our theme song, and to Pete for editing. And Jess, as always, I have to say, I'm sorry for what I said when I was Mormon.
Me too, Hannah. I'm sorry for what I said when I was Mormon too.